The night my face went viral, it wasn't even mine. A video of me, laughing, undressing, touching a stranger, spread across TikTok in less than an hour. My mother-in-law reposted it with the caption, "Protect my son from this woman." I stared at the screen until my reflection in the glass blurred with the lie. By morning, my credit cards were frozen, my law firm suspended me, and my husband didn't answer my calls. Everyone said I should disappear, but I knew better. If they thought a deep fake could bury me, they hadn't seen the real me yet. When I first married into the West family, people called me lucky. I was 36, a partner track attorney with a resume polished to gleam, and yet every magazine feature painted me as if I had won the lottery with my husband, Daniel West, heir to a dynasty that owned more than half the city's skyline. The wedding had been a spectacle. Roses trucked in from Ecuador, a string quartet flown from Vienna, and a guest list curated like a political summit. It looked like a fairy tale, and for a moment, I let myself believe it might be one. The first few months were drenched in perfection. Daniel and I smiled into cameras, held hands on red carpets, and played the roles expected of us. His mother, Evelyn West, turned our marriage into weekly content for her podcast. Millions tuned in to hear her dissect family values, while occasionally inviting me on to share trivial stories about cooking together or balancing law with marriage. I became a curated symbol of happiness, an ornament in their empire's glass case. Behind the curtain, cracks were hairline, but growing. Daniel worked late nights that never made sense, and Evelyn's questions in private never sounded like concern, only cross-examination. "Are you investing too much in your firm? Don't you think your priorities should shift to family?" she asked once, sipping her martini. I smiled, dodged, pretended not to hear the disdain under her words. Then came the night everything shattered. I was preparing briefs in my study when my phone buzzed with alerts, one after another, until the screen glowed like a warning beacon. My name was trending. The first clip I opened nearly made me drop the phone. It was my face, my voice, my gestures, yet not mine. A deep fake had me tangled in sheets with a stranger, laughing in a voice too perfect to question. My pulse stuttered. Within minutes, TikTok swarmed with edits, stitches, duets mocking me. Hashtags declared me unfaithful. Evelyn reposted it on her own account with the caption, "Protecting my son is my duty. This is not the woman she pretends to be." The betrayal burned sharper than the smear itself. My own mother-in-law threw gasoline on the fire. I rushed to Daniel's wing of the penthouse, desperate for his denial, his defense. He sat in his chair with a glass of bourbon, scrolling his phone. His jaw was locked, unreadable. "It's not real," I blurted, breathless. He glanced up, eyes as calm as if I'd confessed to forgetting groceries. "We'll figure it out," he said softly. But there was no urgency, no outrage. He didn't ask who had done it. He didn't hold me. He simply sipped and turned his screen face down. That night, my credit cards failed one by one. I discovered my accounts frozen, access revoked, like invisible locks snapping shut. Daniel never mentioned it, but silence has its own cruelty. I lay awake in the vast bed, scrolling through comments that gutted me. Gold digger, cheat, fraud. Every insult hammered at the facade I had built through years of work. The next morning, I drove to my office only to find my access card disabled. Security staff avoided my eyes. HR sent a polite email placing me on administrative leave pending review. The clip had infiltrated my professional reputation, blurring the line between scandal and evidence. In law, perception can weigh more than proof. My colleagues already believed the worst. When I confronted Evelyn, she wore a mask of maternal sorrow. "Clara, you must understand I only shared it because people deserve transparency. Our family cannot be dragged into shame." Her voice dripped with manufactured empathy. In the studio, cameras gleamed. She was recording another podcast episode. I noticed her producer's laptop screen flashing thumbnails of raw files, files marked with metadata that didn't align with TikTok uploads, files that looked freshly generated. Later that night, while Daniel showered, I searched his desk. Buried under corporate paperwork, I found equity documents. He was a silent shareholder in a startup AI company. My stomach turned when I saw the company's logo, the same watermark embedded faintly in the corner of the leaked deepfake. His support of me at home, his half-hearted words of reassurance, had been theater. He was part of the machine that forged my downfall. I thought of my law career, my cases, the long nights spent climbing a ladder built of merit. All of it could be erased by a fabricated video and a family that considered me disposable. They had set the stage carefully, first ruin my credibility, then cut my financial oxygen, then watch me collapse until I was unfit to inherit any trust fund tied to Daniel's lineage. The realization struck like ice. This wasn't random sabotage, it was design. The West family had crafted an illusion, made me believe I was safe inside their empire, only to cast me out when convenient. I was no wife in their eyes, no equal, just an investment to liquidate. The next episode of Evelyn's podcast dropped within hours. Its title glared across Spotify charts, Clara, the Gold Digger We Trusted. I listened, frozen. My name rolled from her tongue like a verdict. She described me as cunning, opportunistic, a woman who had ensnared her son for wealth. Her listeners devoured every word, leaving comments of disgust, betrayal, mock sympathy for Daniel. The story had calcified. The illusion was broken, but illusions work both ways. As the last words of her podcast echoed in my ears, I promised myself, if they had built an empire on lies, then I would learn to weaponize the truth. I knew better than to fight fire with fire in public. After the podcast, I vanished. My Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all gone overnight. Tabloids reported I had fled, too guilty to face the truth. Evelyn's supporters celebrated, believing the villain of their favorite soap opera had been cast out. Let them. Disappearance was camouflage. Behind the curtain, I was alive and watching. I created a new identity, a nameless profile on Reddit, where anonymity was armor and truth could survive disguised as rumor. I uploaded stills of metadata I had copied from Evelyn's producer's laptop. Timestamps, mismatched frame rates, anomalies too sharp for coincidence. Users debated feverishly. Could this be evidence of a fabricated scandal? Threads caught traction, and for the first time since the smear, the current shifted. Doubt bloomed. The Wests had enemies, and enemies loved a story that weakened a dynasty. I pretended to be shattered, pacing my penthouse rooms like a ghost whenever Daniel was home, letting him see only shadows of me. In truth, each night I worked deep into dawn, screens glowing with ledgers and code. My old life resurfaced, the one I had before law school, when I co-founded a fintech startup with college friends. Back then, I specialized in tracking rogue transactions across blockchain, mapping where dirty money tried to hide. Everyone thought I had abandoned that world, but skills don't evaporate. They wait. Through countless ledgers, one wallet caught my attention. A string of transactions fed directly into a company registered under an obscure tech consultancy. Amounts were suspiciously aligned with the date the deep fake first circulated. I dug deeper, following the chain through mixers meant to obscure trails. At the end of the chain, the name glowed back at me in official registration, Evelyn West. My mother-in-law herself had paid the company that created the video. I stared at the ledger until my eyes blurred. It wasn't just malice, it was premeditated sabotage with money as its blood. And I had proof. But proof is nothing without power. My frozen accounts reminded me daily that the West family controlled most of my finances. That was when I remembered something I had nearly dismissed as foolish. A collection of NFTs I bought years ago, back when digital art was a meme and no one thought value could live in pixels. I had purchased them for amusement, a gesture of curiosity, and had forgotten them. Now their market price had exploded. What once cost me hundreds was worth millions. I moved swiftly, liquidating part of the collection into a cold wallet under my control. Independence pulsed through me like oxygen, returning to starved lungs. I no longer needed Daniel's credit cards, nor Evelyn's allowances. My war chest was my own, earned in silence. Still, money alone could not topple a dynasty's narrative. I needed a voice trusted beyond reproach. That was when I reached out to a journalist I had once cross-examined on a panel, Marcus Hale, host of a top-ranked true crime podcast that unraveled corporate corruption for millions of listeners each week. Marcus had built his reputation on exposing the powerful with documents, voices, and stories they couldn't suppress. I contacted him through encrypted email attaching only a single screenshot, the blockchain ledger, tying Evelyn West's wallet to the deepfake company. His reply came within hours. "If this is real, you have a story bigger than any I've told. Meet me." Trusting Marcus was dangerous. Exposing Evelyn meant burning Daniel too, because silence is complicity, and shareholders are never innocent. If the world learned what I knew, the West family's empire would collapse. But so would the illusion of my marriage. Every vow, every photo, every interview would unravel into theater, staged for money and power. For days I debated, walking circles in my apartment, the walls closing in. Did justice demand I destroy them, or was I simply exacting revenge dressed as righteousness? Each possibility weighed heavy, yet one truth steadied me. Silence would make me their accomplice. I gave Marcus the files. He asked for more, pressed me for the origin. I hesitated. Then came the moment that shattered hesitation. An audio file, anonymously sent to me through an encrypted Dropbox. The voice was Daniel's, my husband's, smooth, deliberate, unmistakable. We'll use her as the example. Public humiliation. It keeps shareholders confident we protect our own. By the time she protests, she'll be irrelevant. I replayed it again and again until the words carved scars inside me. It wasn't just Evelyn. Daniel himself had designed the spectacle, volunteered me as the sacrificial lamb to prove loyalty to the family. My hands trembled as I pressed play one final time, the audio filling the room. The man who once whispered promises in my ear now spoke of me as a tool, a disposable asset. My marriage was not betrayal at the margins. It was betrayal at the core. The revelation of Daniel's voice should have broken me, but instead it clarified everything. Evelyn was not the sole architect. She was a pawn, a mouthpiece. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The entire West conglomerate had orchestrated my downfall. I wasn't collateral damage. I was a calculated sacrifice. They had transformed me into a cautionary tale for anyone who dared cross them. As I pieced through company filings and old calendars, patterns emerged. Every business trip Daniel had taken aligned suspiciously with quarterly audits. He was never absent randomly. Each absence coincided with the precise windows when compliance teams reviewed financials. He hadn't been working late at all. He had been engineering escape routes, detours to dodge regulators. I looked back at dinners missed, anniversaries postponed, all the moments he claimed to be trapped in meetings. They weren't meetings. They were exits. The realization chilled me more than Evelyn's betrayal. Daniel had never once been my partner. He had always been the family's emissary, keeping me at bay while the dynasty laundered its sins. And just as I thought I understood the scope, a new player entered. A message blinked across my encrypted email one night. "We know what they did. We'll pay for the files." Attached was a digital calling card with a serpent emblem, known in circles as a hacker collective aligned with WestCorp's fiercest rival. They wanted the blockchain records, the audio, the receipts I had collected. In exchange, they offered anonymity, safe passage, and an account already loaded with cryptocurrency. It was temptation wrapped in danger. Selling to them would grant me instant revenge, but it would also mean surrendering my narrative. My fight wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. If I sold the evidence, I would become another shadow in their war, erased as soon as my usefulness expired. I refused. Silence was my only reply. The West struck back swiftly. My accounts, what remained after my NFT liquidations, were frozen by court injunction. Every legal argument I filed bounced against walls erected by judges too familiar with the family's donations. Then the media turned. Clara West accused of embezzling family trust. Headlines screamed that I had siphoned funds, betraying the very empire that had embraced me. It was fiction dressed as fact, but perception was their sharpest blade. My phone lit with messages from colleagues, some cloaked in pity, others in disgust. One text from a junior associate read simply, "We believed in you. Don't make this worse." It cut deeper than Evelyn's podcast ever could. Desperation pushed me to fight publicly. I uploaded the blockchain ledgers and snippets of the metadata to Twitter, hoping raw evidence might silence the storm. For a few hours, hope flickered. People retweeted, debated, questioned the narrative. Then came the counterstrike. Armies of AI bots swarmed my posts, flooding replies with doctored screenshots, fake statements attributed to me, and endless repeats of Clara lies. Within a day, my evidence was buried under an avalanche of synthetic noise. Algorithms flagged me for disinformation. My account was suspended. My attempt at light had become another shadow. I realized then that I was outmatched. This wasn't a battle of truth versus lies. It was a war of scale, and the Wests owned the machines that multiplied narratives. The final blow came with a board meeting leak. The deepfake had not been Evelyn's personal vendetta. It was greenlit at the very top. Daniel's grandfather, Charles West, the patriarch, the titan, the chairman whose hand shook markets, had orchestrated the entire campaign. Evelyn had executed, Daniel had facilitated, but Charles had planned it all. He was the true enemy. The realization stole my breath. His face, carved into corporate history, had been at my wedding, beaming as though welcoming me. Now I knew his smile had been prophecy, not blessing. He had always intended to unmake me. Then came the gavel. The Bar Association suspended my license, pending investigation into financial misconduct. Every case I had built dissolved. My name carried no authority, only scandal. I was an attorney without standing, a woman without credibility. I hit rock bottom. Days bled into nights. My reflection hollowed. Calls went unanswered. Allies scattered. The dynasty had stripped me not just of power, but of identity. I was nothing more than their constructed villain. And then, in the silence, my laptop pinged. A new message appeared, unsigned, its encryption unfamiliar. The text was stark, simple, chilling. You want it back? You want more than back? Then play the long game. We'll show you how. I stared at the words, my pulse hammering. Somewhere in the dark, a door had cracked open. But stepping through meant surrendering what little I still owned, the illusion that justice could be clean. The anonymous message had been both a threat and a promise. Play the long game. I thought about those words every hour until the shape of a plan began to emerge. If the Wests wanted to ruin me with spectacle, I would answer with law. Not the fragile courtrooms they controlled, but a shadow case. My own prosecution of their empire, built outside their reach. I spent weeks piecing it together. Blockchain ledgers, shell company charts, investment portfolios masked as charities, all woven into a dossier thick enough to sink any dynasty. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Westcorp wasn't just laundering money. It was the engine behind an entire web of offshore accounts and shell foundations used to funnel billions. Every transaction bore the fingerprints of power, and every fingerprint led to Charles West. But information was not enough. I needed credibility, someone outside my ruined reputation who could wield this evidence like a blade. That was when fate offered irony. Amanda Price, an attorney I had once clashed with in open court, reached out. She had mocked me publicly when the deepfake first dropped, calling me reckless. Yet now her own career teetered. A doctored video had surfaced of her as well, shattering her reputation overnight. "I hate you," Amanda said bluntly at our first secret meeting in a diner far from the city. "But I hate them more, and they use the same weapon on me." Her eyes were steady, her voice raw. For the first time, I felt the weight of solidarity, however reluctant. Together, we began assembling the shadow case into something prosecutable. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale's podcast prepared to launch its most ambitious series yet. We titled it The Phoenix Protocol. It was not just my story. It was every story of manipulated images, synthetic lies, reputations destroyed by the West machine. The first episode dropped at midnight on a Tuesday. By sunrise, it had climbed the charts. By evening, the world was buzzing. The series walked listeners step by step through the corruption. Blockchain ledgers narrated like crime scenes. Whistleblowers disguised their voices to recount shady contracts. My voice appeared only once, reading a single line. If they think destroying me is justice, they should see what justice truly looks like. It was enough. Social media exploded. Headlines shifted. The empire that had painted me a villain was suddenly on trial in the court of public opinion. Markets noticed. Westcorp's stock slid violently, billions wiped out in days. Lawsuits filed by angry shareholders flooded in, each accusing the family of betrayal. I watched the news at dawn, exhaustion and adrenaline tangled in my veins. For the first time since the nightmare began, the current flowed my way. But victory attracts predators. As the lawsuits grew, the FBI stepped in. Their raids exposed entire networks of shell foundations feeding into offshore accounts. The financial skeletons rattled loudly enough to wake the whole country. Reporters camped outside the West headquarters. Daniel disappeared into silence, unreachable even by text. Evelyn's podcast went dark. It should have felt triumphant. Yet something gnawed at me. As investigators dug deeper, a pattern sharpened. Daniel hadn't orchestrated anything. He had merely played his role, signing papers, nodding on cue, another piece in Charles West's boardroom theater. My husband had never been my equal nor my betrayer, only a pawn, and that truth unsettled me more than his betrayal. Pawns don't think. They follow, which meant every choice, every humiliation, every weapon turned against me had come from one man, Charles. When the dust cleared, my name rose again, but not as I intended. The internet crowned me a symbol. Headlines screamed, "Clara West, the Avenger Bride." Memes painted me with fire in my eyes, rising from ash. Strangers DM'd me, begging for guidance, calling me a hero, a saint, a goddess of vengeance. They missed the woman beneath the caricature. I hadn't wanted sainthood. I had wanted survival. The hollow taste of victory spread across my days. Even as markets crumbled, even as Evelyn cowered from subpoenas, I felt less free than before. They had built a cage for me again, this time of worship instead of hate. Both cages locked me away from who I really was. Then, one evening, my phone rang. An unlisted number, the kind that should not have reached me. I answered. The voice was slow, deliberate, commanding. Charles West. "You've done well," he said, like a teacher grading an exam. "But don't fool yourself. I let you win this round." Rage surged, but before I could reply, he continued. "There's a secret I hold. If it comes out, you'll lose more than you've gained. Think carefully before you dig further. The phoenix burns as easily as it rises." The line went dead. Went. I stared at the phone, my chest heaving. Victory had been real, yes, but incomplete. The war was not over. It had only just revealed its true battlefield. Fame came faster than justice. Within weeks of the podcast series, my inbox flooded with offers. Networks wanted me to host talk shows. Publishers dangled book deals. Brands pitched me as the face of resilient womanhood. People wore t-shirts with my face printed above the words, "Rise like Clara." At first I laughed at the absurdity. Then the money began to arrive. Contracts worth more than my entire career had promised. But every dollar felt laced with poison. I had become a brand, not a person. Interviewers no longer asked about the evidence, only about my feelings, my aesthetic, how I kept my hair camera ready while surviving scandal. Justice had been eclipsed by marketability. The whispers started soon after. Isn't she exploiting her trauma? She's profiting from being a victim. On Twitter, threads dissected my NFT fund and painted me greedy, calculating. The very independence that had saved me was now a weapon against me. Once again, perception outweighed truth, and the pendulum swung from sympathy to suspicion. It would have been tolerable if only my image suffered. But the machine struck closer. Marcus Hale, the journalist who had risked everything to tell my story, began receiving threats. Anonymous callers promised that if he aired another episode, he would not live to regret it. He confessed to me one night, voice trembling, "I can't protect my family, Clara. I've done my part. They're after me now." Hearing the fear in his voice broke something inside me. My fight had spilled blood beyond my own veins. Allies were paying prices I never intended. Was this victory, or was it corruption disguised as triumph? Then came the call that tore the floor from under me. Charles West summoned me to his private residence. I expected confrontation, perhaps another warning. Instead, he poured whiskey into crystal glasses and spoke with unsettling calm. "You wonder why we hated you so easily," he began, his eyes piercing mine. "It wasn't just that you threatened our dynasty. It was blood." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You're my daughter." He said it like a verdict, not a confession. "Born of a mistake I paid to bury. Your mother was compensated to disappear, but she didn't. You resurfaced, brilliant, ambitious, clawing into the world I built. And when you married Daniel, you became a danger, not a wife, an echo of my shame." The words hollowed me out. I tried to speak, but breath abandoned me. My husband was my stepbrother? My entire marriage had been an incestuous charade staged for cameras and shareholders. The family had wanted me gone, not merely because I was an outsider, but because I was the ultimate insider, the living scar of Charles's past. He leaned closer. "Do you see now? Your exile wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. But perhaps, Clara, you've proven yourself. Perhaps you were meant to endure." I left his mansion shaking, the revelation poisoning my blood. Every victory, every shred of resilience had been born from manipulation more intimate than I could fathom. The next days revealed the full scope. Documents leaked to me showed that the deepfake, the financial freeze, the smear campaigns, all were part of what Charles called the Phoenix Plan. It was never about erasing me. It was about testing me. He had designed the gauntlet to see if I was strong enough to inherit what he considered his immortal legacy. I confronted him again, fury burning through fear. "You destroyed me to crown me?" He smiled, thin and cruel. "Weak heirs collapse, strong heirs rise. You survived the furnace. That makes you worthy." Worthy. The word clanged like a chain around my neck. To him, I was not a woman, not a wife, not even a daughter. I was an experiment. The betrayal twisted into something deeper than Evelyn's podcast or Daniel's silence. It was existential. My entire suffering had been scripted, every humiliation a page in Charles's curriculum. Then he made his offer. "The board is fractured, the family is finished, but the company can live. You can lead it. You, Clara, can be the phoenix. Or you can burn it all to the ground and walk away. Choose wisely." My heart slammed against my ribs. CEO of West Corp, the pinnacle of power, the summit I had been unknowingly molded to reach. But accepting meant validating every cruelty, every manipulation. Rejecting meant obliterating not only the dynasty, but the chance to wield its influence for good. In that moment, I stood between two abysses. One promised domination, the other destruction. Both demanded the death of the woman I had once been. The night after Charles's ultimatum, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the skyline his empire had built. Glass towers glittered like teeth, each one a reminder of the bargain on the table: power or ruin. For hours, I weighed the choice. To lead meant inheriting the throne of a corrupt king. To destroy meant losing the leverage that could save others from my fate. I had been forged in their fire, but I would not let them dictate the shape I took when I emerged. The answer came in a whisper I barely recognized as my own: break the game. By dawn, I liquidated every remaining NFT in my portfolio. I signed over my podcast royalties, my speaking fees, the last vestiges of my unexpected celebrity. I funneled it all into a foundation, registered under a single name: the Phoenix Foundation. Its purpose was plain and brutal: legal defense, psychological support, and technological aid for victims of digital forgery, deep fake harassment, and financial sabotage. My empire would not be steel and glass, it would be protection for those who had none. The announcement detonated across the internet. Commentators expected me to step into the CEO chair, to prove my dominance over the family that had tried to destroy me. Instead, I renounced it all. People called me insane, naive, saintly, reckless. I ignored every label. For the first time, my choice wasn't reactive. It was mine. Then came the sacrifice. At a press conference crowded with cameras, I revealed the truth Charles had hurled like a weapon: that I was his daughter, concealed and discarded, bound by blood to the dynasty I rejected. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Headlines screamed within minutes. The scandal was nuclear, but with exposure came liberation. No one could ever again use that secret against me. The backlash was immediate. Stocks plummeted further. Lawsuits multiplied. Analysts debated whether I had ended the West family for good or merely accelerated their restructuring. But in the shadows of chaos, I found clarity. The Phoenix Foundation received thousands of messages from victims: students framed by fake videos, journalists silenced by fabricated scandals, ordinary people losing jobs, families, lives because of synthetic lies. Their stories piled on my desk, raw and bleeding. They became my cause. Still, the war wasn't finished. A leaked dossier reached me through anonymous channels. Documents showing Charles still controlled a hidden fund offshore, a dark fund that had bankrolled not only my downfall, but dozens of other manipulations. His grip had loosened, but not broken. He remained the spider at the center of a shredded web. The revelation promised another battle, but this time I wouldn't fight alone. Lawmakers, spurred by the chaos of my case, introduced legislation to criminalize malicious deep fakes and provide restitution to victims. I testified before committees, presenting blockchain evidence, recounting the nightmare of being erased and rewritten by machines. Each appearance felt like peeling away a scar, but the wounds built momentum. The law passed, a precedent etched into history. I evolved with it. No longer a disgraced attorney, no longer a symbol of scandal, I became something new, an architect of digital justice. My courtroom wasn't bound by walls anymore. It stretched across networks, legislatures, podcasts, and lecture halls. Months later, I stood on the stage of a TED conference, red circle beneath my heels, lights blinding. The auditorium held thousands, but the silence was absolute. I told my story not as tragedy, but as blueprint. I spoke of the fragility of truth in a world where images lie, of the need for systems stronger than reputations, of resilience not as survival, but as design. I ended with a question, my voice steady, my reflection staring back from the massive screen above me. If justice itself can be faked, will you still believe in it? The hall held its breath. Some nodded, some frowned, all were unsettled. That was enough. Justice wasn't about comfort. It was about confrontation. I left the stage to thunderous applause, but applause no longer mattered. The legacy had begun not in headlines, but in the lives that would no longer be erased without a fight. Somewhere beyond the lights, I imagined Charles listening, calculating, waiting. His dark fund remained, his influence unfinished. But I was no longer playing his game. I had built my own, and this time, I wasn't alone. The phoenix had risen, not from their fire, but from mine.